all things mobile. So this training is the 9th training in our 2011 series of webinars focusing on strategic issues to help the legal services organizations better understand how technology can meet your mission and your service delivery goals. I am now going to turn things over to Liz Keith, who manages Pro Bono Net's statewide websites program, to discuss all things mobile.
Great. Thank you, Allison, and welcome again, everybody, to today's training, All Things Mobile. This, as Allison mentioned, this training is the 9th in a series of webinars focusing on strategic issues to help legal services organizations better understand how technology can meet their mission and service delivery goals. And this series is funded by the Legal Services Corporation's Technology Initiative Grant Program and offered through a partnership between the Legal Services Technology Assistance Project and Pro Bono Net. And today's training will examine the changing landscape of mobile technology and how legal aid programs can use mobile tools to expand resources available to clients and enhance services. And we have a great panel with us today to discuss this topic. We'll be starting off with Michele Paolella, a social worker with Day One, a New York City organization working with youth to end teen dating violence. Then we will turn it to Gwen Daniels, the Director of Technology Development at Illinois Legal Aid Online. Then also joining us is Kathleen Caldwell and Brian Stewart. Kathleen is the Client Education Coordinator at Pine Tree Legal Assistance in Maine, and Brian has worked with Kathleen on their mobile initiative. And then we'll wrap up with Christine Mandiloff, the Community Legal Education Attorney with Montana Legal Services Association. And thanks so much to our panel. We are delighted to have your perspectives and expertise on this topic. For starters, we wanted to just define what we mean by mobile for the context of this training to set the stage for what you'll hear about today. And there are 3 types of mobile strategies that we'll be talking about. The first is SMS text message or text messaging. SMS stands for Short Message Service, and those are text messages that are sent from a mobile phone and are limited to 160 characters. So this is a familiar use of cell phones with wide adoption, especially among younger audiences, and is something that's supported by the vast majority of phones these days, even the most basic ones. Depending on someone's service package, they may pay a fee to send or receive text messages or have a certain number of texts included in their monthly subscription fee. We'll also be talking about mobile apps, which are internet applications that run on smartphones and other mobile devices like tablets. And these can be paid or free and are usually downloaded from an online app store like the Apple App Store or the Android Marketplace. And they're often designed to interface with other features of your mobile phone. For example, your smartphone's location recognition features. So if you've downloaded the Yelp app, for example, and you're traveling and want to find a restaurant open at midnight, you can set the app to automatically recognize what city you're in and return local results. The last type of mobile strategy we'll be talking about today are mobile websites. These are websites that are optimized for browsing on the small displays that usually come with mobile devices. And again, this is a familiar, common use for mobile phones. If you open the web browser on your mobile phone and browse out to CNN.com or ESPN.com, it will look very different than the standard version of that site. And going back to our Yelp example, if you browse out to the Yelp site from your phone, it will look different than the standard website, but also won't integrate with some of the native features of your smartphone the way that the Yelp app would. So one thing to keep in mind is that when we talk about mobile websites, this isn't limited specifically to websites. In last month's online intake webinar, we heard how Legal Services Alabama is developing a version of their HTML online intake form that's optimized for display on mobile devices. And design-wise, the distinction between mobile apps and mobile sites is starting to blur a bit. Many mobile websites are starting to kind of take on the look and feel of apps. So you may see some of that today. There are other mobile strategies and mobile technologies that we're not going to focus on, but I did want to call them out because they're terms that you'll likely hear. One is multimedia messaging, so the ability to send pictures or barcodes or videos through a mobile phone. It's used a lot these days for sending coupon-type content. There's also the ability now to deliver ads through mobile devices, either banner ads that appear inside applications or inside games that you play on your mobile phone, or text, advertising text at the end of SMS messages. And then this last category called integrated voice response, or IVR, which are applications that can process what you say, can process speech. For example, GPS applications that you give directions to, or more recently, the really high-profile launch of the Siri personal assistant launched for the iPhone. So why are we doing a webinar on mobile strategies? Well, I think that one of the main drivers behind this is the dramatic increase in mobile technology adoption among both client and advocate audiences in the last several years. Most Americans now own some kind of cell phone, and mobile devices account for a growing percentage of all web traffic. And 7% may seem small, but that has essentially doubled within the last year and is projected to rise dramatically over the next several years. And increasingly, people are going online or preferring to go online primarily from their mobile device. So they either don't have a traditional laptop or desktop connection, or they favor the portability of their mobile device for getting online. This last graph is just a snapshot from last year of what people are doing with their mobile phone. So there's a lot more than that people are using their phones for than just making calls. They're sending text messages, they're taking photos, accessing the web, and performing really a wide range of transactions with their mobile devices. And we'll hear some more about this today. So I'm going to start and open it up to Michele from Day One. And I thought this model might be of particular interest to the legal aid community because it's a relatively low-tech way of getting started with SMS, and it's also integrated with an online chat service that Day One recently launched that is analogous in many ways to the live chat or live help service provided on a number of statewide legal aid websites. So Michele, I'll turn it over to you to talk more about this model.
Great, thank you so much, Liz. Hi everybody, I'm Michele. I'm the social worker at Day One, and we're an organization in New York City that works with young people 24 and under to end intimate partner abuse among teens and young adults. And we recently launched a chat and text helpline, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. And as Liz mentioned, it is very low tech, and the reason for that is in addition to the fact that I know nothing about these kinds of technologies, also that we had a very limited budget for starting this service that we thought would be useful to young people, because we know that young people are really accessing information online really consistently. But at the same time, we didn't have any budget to create something like a short code, which is a small number that you can send a text to. So for example, sometimes you see text your question to help, and it would be HELP, right? Those short numbers cost anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 a year, and we had a $0 budget. So we decided to start with online chat and also texting through using a Google number. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the way that we keep that anonymous and the instant message kind of feature. I'll talk a little bit about the text and then our experiences with it and why it's been really exciting and the challenges that we faced. So this is just a screenshot of our website. If you go to Day One's website, which is www.day1ny.org, you can navigate to chat with us. And once you click on chat with us, you see this icon that says live chat is either online or offline, and you click here to email us if it's offline, or if it's online, click here to chat with us. we set up this chat line using a third party kind of intermediary called plupper.com, which is a chat service that you can integrate into your site to be able to allow visitors to chat with you, but in an anonymous way. So they don't have to be friends with us. They don't have to have any kind of identifying information. Plupper assigns them an anonymous number, and they can chat with us through our website. Plupper is free up to a certain number of users from each organization, and at Day One what we do is just share my free login, which keeps it 100% free for us. Young people come to the website during the hours that we are available. They click on chat and they have instant access to us where they can ask us questions about teen dating violence or for referrals. And we find that they oftentimes feel more comfortable reaching out to us knowing that it's anonymous and confidential. If you look, it's not on the screenshot here, but a little bit further down, one of the things that we were really certain to say is that this isn't an emergency line. There are 24-hour chats and text message services where people will respond right away, and this is not one of them, that we work only in these specific hours. The other thing that we did in conjunction with this is set up a text message number through Google, it's just a Google phone number that is only given out as it relates to text messaging. So you can see here it's 646-535-DAY1. And if young people come to our website, we also have a just outreach flyers, and we've been kind of old school in the way that we've done outreach with this, paper flyers everywhere to the Department of Education and to community organizations and centers. And so this text message number is there, and it again masks the number that they're sending us a text message from, and it also keeps us really cleanly kind of categorized so that we know when text messages are coming from people that have our actual cell phone numbers, so people who are clients are already engaged with us, and when people are texting us to the text number, so that would indicate that they're texting us for the first time as a result of seeing some of these flyers. So far, I think we've had a lot of really positive things that have come out of this. I think we've seen that young people in particular definitely reach out and ask us a lot of questions. We do, I don't think I said, but Day One does provide legal and social services, but the social service staff is are the people who are staffing this. So social workers and social work interns are the ones who are staffing these questions. And when someone has a legal question, our goal is to kind of work them into feeling comfortable enough to transition from online to telephone or intake. And we've been successful in that a few times. But for some people, they also just want to know, is what I'm experiencing abuse, or is this a healthy relationship? And they just want to ask us questions, and so we can just chat with them about those things. Another real positive thing that's come out of this for us is that we automatically have every interaction documented in a very objective way. So I can go back into my interns' old chats and see exactly what the young people were asking them and exactly how they were responding. Same thing with the text. We can have a really specific online documentation that doesn't rely on our subjective kind of note-taking. I would say that some of our challenges have been that, again, I kind of joke around that I think I didn't get a cell phone until 2003. I'm really not good at this stuff, and so it's really easy and user-friendly, but it's not that sophisticated or advanced. And so sometimes when there are troubleshooting things that go wrong, I think we've had challenges finding the right people to help us work through some of those troubleshoots. And usually what's happened is that the bugs have just worked themselves out before we figured out a response to the technical kind of difficulties that we've faced, which have mostly been just as Plupper grows and works out its kinks. plupper.com. It's really an interesting website. And another challenge is just staffing. So for us, these limited hours are all that we can staff right now with our capacity, but they're not the best hours to reach clients who are in crisis or who have questions about the topic that we focus on, which is intimate partner abuse. I think that a lot of times people click the website documents when people click on the icon, whether we're there or not, and a lot of times people are clicking in the overnight hours. So we're not there during the overnight, and we're not moving toward a 24-hour model. So we're just trying to figure out efficient ways to refer. I think that that's mostly what I wanted to talk about from my end. I can't remember if there was anything else, Liz, that you had asked me to share about our model.
Great. Thank you, Michele. I think that's a really nice overview. There was one question from Molly who asked for the spelling of Pluffer or Fluffer?
Yes, it's Pluffer, P as in Paul, L as in love, U-P-P-E-R.
Great, thank you. Great, thanks, Michele. If there are any other questions, feel free to send those through the chat box. Michele has to drop off in about 10 minutes, but if we aren't able to get to them before she has to leave, then we will follow up by email afterwards. Great, thanks so much, Michele.
Thank you.
So sticking with the SMS theme here, Matthew Burnett, the director of the Immigration Advocates Network, was traveling today and not able to join us. So I'm going to give an overview of an SMS and mobile app project that he is spearheading that uses kind of a similar SMS medium as Michele just described, but has a somewhat different technical approach. And as background, both the Citizenship Works SMS pilot and mobile app are extensions of a new website that was recently launched by the Immigration Advocates Network, Pro Bono Net, and the Immigrant Legal Resource Center called citizenshipworks.org. And that site provides easy-to-use interactive tools to help low-income immigrants answer questions about their eligibility for naturalization, learn about the naturalization process, and prepare for the civics and English tests. And one of the central features of citizenshipworks.org is a searchable online directory available in both English and Spanish of more than 900 free or low-cost immigration legal services providers in all 50 states. And the directory allows users to search by geographic region or types of assistance provided, population served, and languages spoken. And in addition to the online version of the directory, Citizenship Works is developing an SMS pilot to complement that, and that will leverage the data in the directory. And the way it will work is users will be able to text a keyword, such as citizenship, to a short code to opt in to getting messages from Citizenship Works. And as Michele mentioned, a short code is a special shortened phone number that can be used to address text messages. So if you've ever voted for a contestant on American Idol, you've probably texted the word vote to a 4 or 5 digit number on the screen, or donated to earthquake relief in Japan or Haiti by text. You would send that message using a keyword to a short code number. With Citizenship Works, after users send that keyword to the short code, they'll get a message back asking them to input their zip code and address. At that point, they will get returned by text data from the Immigration Legal Services directory about programs in their local area that provide services, immigration legal services. And the information will also include a link back to citizenshipworks.org. One of the interesting aspects about this approach that Matthew described to me is this kind of campaign can be tied to specific outreach activities. You can track where people are learning about the campaign. For example, you could have an ad on a bus that uses one keyword and an ad on a poster or a flyer that uses a different keyword, or have a keyword in a different language and be able to track how many messages come in from each source. Citizenship Works is also considering using text messaging for targeted follow-up with users who have requested information from the directory. For example, possibly sending a follow-up text to find out if the individual has actually contacted one of the providers in the directory. And depending on the SMS platform or vendor that you're using, you can target messages and different types of information to different groups based on the information they provide you. So whether or not they answered yes or no on a particular question, or what their zip code is, for example. This pilot project is using the Mobile Commons and Data platform, and the website is there for reference. As part of this initiative, Bono Net, which the Citizenship Works platform is developed on the Bono Net platform, and Bono Net is developing an interface between the Immigration Legal Services Directory and Mobile Commons to serve up the most up-to-date directory data through that text messaging campaign. And this initiative has been funded by the Knight Foundation and will be launched in early 2012 in both English and Spanish in targeted cities. So it won't be national initially, it will be launched in specific metropolitan areas. Citizenship Works is also developing a mobile app that will provide access to the information in the directory and information about the naturalization process through a mobile application and through somebody downloading and interfacing with that through their mobile phone. So an example of the kind of information that could be served up through the app would be a Q&A resource to test the user's familiarity with the civics questions, or help them practice their English. And this will launch later, probably mid-2012, in both English and Spanish. It's also been funded by the Knight Foundation. And I'm happy to field any initial questions now, but I've also included Matthew Burnett's contact information here for anybody that would like to learn more. Okay, great. Well, please keep the questions coming through the Q&A box, and we will pause at the end of each section to respond to those. So we're going to transition now away from SMS more fully to mobile apps, and I'm going to turn it over to Gwen Daniels to talk about mobile apps that she has spearheaded at Illinois Legal Aid Online. And Allison, would you mind changing the panelist for the screen sharing to Gwen?
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Do you guys see the mobile apps PowerPoint?
Not yet. We're seeing. Oh, there we go. Yep.
Okay.
We're seeing your desktop.
All right. So we are working with Pine Tree Legal Assistance on a mobile app project that's funded under a TIG grant this year. We don't actually have a separate mobile website, but we decided to go ahead and build mobile apps. And part of that is we've seen an unbelievable growth in our mobile use, from 1% in September of 2009 to 12% in September of 2011 on the public website, and 95% of that traffic is either an Android device or an Apple product, which are great if you're going to do mobile apps because they both have very popular marketplaces. It allowed us to streamline our content delivery into a very small package. And I'm going to take you through the Legal Aid app in a second, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And it allowed us to create a platform that doesn't necessarily require an active internet connection. We built the app so that it works offline. And that's something that we just can't do yet with our website. So a little technical background on how our apps work. We opted to not build true native apps. And by true native apps, I mean ones that are written in the programming language for the platform that you're building. For an Android device, it's Java. And for an iTunes, an Apple app, it's Objective-C. Instead, we went with an approach of using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, basically a web page, and then you wrapped it into a native component. The advantages to that were that we already know HTML, we already know JavaScript, we already know CSS, and it, for the most part, gives us the ability to really only have to maintain sort of one platform. We're using PhoneGap, which is a JavaScript library that provides hooks into native phone functionality. That means I can make JavaScript calls in my code that hook into being able to add a contact into someone's address book on their phone, or read their contacts, or access their geolocation. jQuery Mobile is a JavaScript library that provides a sort of a mobile UI platform, and when Liz started the session, she talked about how apps and websites are looking a lot more alike now. jQuery Mobile is a major reason for that. jQuery Mobile is not an app platform. It can be used on websites, and it gives you a real appearance of a native app. We built an API into our website database to provide access to our existing content. And then we're using Phone Analytics, which is a PhoneGap plugin, to provide a way to integrate Google Analytics into our mobile apps. So you'll see a screenshot now of our legal aid app, and as soon as I can pull it up, I'll bring it over and actually move this out of the way. And you can actually see the app now running in a little iPhone simulator on my machine. And all I do is I can put in my zip code. If I put in a zip code that is not in Illinois, I get redirected to Law Help. But otherwise, I get a maximum right now of 4 helpful organizations in the state. Now, our website will bring back as many as 100. But this is a mobile app. It's not a mobile website. We don't want to put everything in there. Because what you'll lose, it becomes a painful experience when you're dealing with a mobile device that has a much smaller processor and much worse bandwidth than what you're going to get on a regular computer. So we have 3 organizations here, and then below that a list of legal guides. Now the legal guides are designed to look exactly like well, they are the exact same content that is on our public website. We made the decision to try not to create new content or new content formats, and to instead use what we already have, so that we're not having to maintain additional content. And so on the public website, we have these Flash-based modules called a Guide Me that has the same tabs that the mobile app does, and really that Flash front end is just a front end. All the data is stored in a database, so we were able to reuse that same content and just restructure how it's laid out in the app. Now, the app is limited to about 25 pieces of content, and that's partly a display issue. It's largely a bandwidth issue and a storage issue. Everything on our mobile app is actually stored using a SQLite database on the phone itself, which means that if I put it in airplane mode, or I'm out in the middle of rural Illinois where I don't have a good 3G connection, I can still use the app. And I think that's the offline thing is one of the advantages of mobile apps. So we just picked like the 25 most popular subject areas and made sure that we had a legal guide for each of those, and that's what shows up in our content. Okay, yeah, so the other app that we did is the Pro Bono app. Works very similarly from a technical side, we expanded the types of content that are supported to include full text content and sort of a desk reference content, and that's a type of content that we actually had to repurpose. Until the mobile app went live, it was the manual content was actually very long pieces of unstructured HTML, and we built a little builder that allows the content team to chapter it into structured pieces of content, and then we built two different interfaces, one for the website and one for the mobile app, that just displays it differently depending on what device we're on. And that allows us to reuse the same content on both platforms. There's also a calendar, and there's a volunteer search. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, we're on content considerations.
Okay. Yeah. I think one of our biggest considerations was to try to use what we already had. Our public website has about 2,500 pieces of content on it. Adding more really duplicative content for a mobile app was not something we really wanted to do. Like I just mentioned with the desk reference content, you may have to restructure some of the content that you have to make it more mobile friendly, but you should still be able to use it on both platforms. Another thing is a mobile app and a mobile site aren't the same thing. A mobile app should really do one or just a few things and do them really well. And you have to take into consideration that some of your content is just not going to work, at least not now, on a mobile device. Automated forms, even fillable PDFs on a mobile device are difficult just because of the screen size. Apple is not going to support Flash, although there's apparently some workarounds on that. And video requires some different considerations than other types of content, because you don't want to actually store a massive video in part of your app. You're going to want to stream it across as the user's watching it. And then, can you go to the next slide?
Great, we're on technology considerations.
We spent a lot of time figuring out how the app sort of fits in with everything else. We already have as part of our content management system, a statistics system that counts page views, and we have a feedback system that records user feedback that is then available on screen for our content managers to review. We use Google Analytics, so we actually integrated all of those pieces into our mobile apps. There's no such thing as too much testing. Within the first week of our legal aid app going live, that was the first one on iTunes, we'd already released our first patch because we had found something that didn't quite work right. We then a couple weeks later found out when iOS 5 was released that that we had to make some additional changes. The nice thing about developing on the Apple platform is everything's going to work the same on every device. When you're dealing with Android, even though our Android app is only available for 2.2 and up, that's still 422 devices. We can't possibly test on all of them, but we did make sure to test on, at least one that had a pull-out keyboard, one that had a bigger screen, and really review the platform developer guidelines. Both Apple and Android and Google have materials available through their developer programs that give you a lot of really good information on best practices in developing a mobile app. And Apple's are really important to read because there is an upfront approval process before your app can even get approved. There is no approval process for Android apps, but if they're problematic, then Google will take it off the marketplace. Okay, so some of the lessons that I think we've learned is, identify what the app is going to do, what content it needs, and where that will come from early. We started meeting in January to talk about, what this app's going to do, what it's going to look like, and so that when I was ready to start really doing serious development in April, May, and June, the content people had gotten enough done that I had a good base to test off of in terms of pulling in our content. And we had done, clickable prototypes, so we all knew what the app was going to look like even before we started coding it. There's really no such thing as cross-platform apps. Doing it in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS gets you close, but you're still going to have to tweak it for each of the different platforms. There's a huge difference between mobile devices and computers. The first instance of the legal aid app got completely rewritten the first time I had to put it on an actual device because it was just painfully slow. They don't have the processing power, and a 3G connection is nothing compared to a T1 line or a cable connection. So test on a real device as soon as possible and really plan for the launch. Our the rest of our program staff put together a really comprehensive outreach plan for the apps that we're implementing. We timed the legal aid app to go live with the 2011 Illinois Legal Aid Conference and the Pro Bono app to launch with Pro Bono Week. And then, we've updated our websites to detect Android and iOS users and direct them to download the app as soon as they come into the site. And if you go to the next slide. And then finally, I have a list of sort of technical resources that might be useful to anyone else who wants to do an app. And links at the bottom to our two apps, which you can then get the links to download. The Legal Aid app is not yet available on Android. I expect that to be out next week. And as part of the TIG grant, we're going to be working with NTAP to provide some sort of more in-depth technical resources into the early part of next year.
Great, thank you, Gwen. And apologies for the technical difficulties with GoToMeeting. I had a quick question. You mentioned how important and intensive the testing was for the apps. Can you talk a little bit about how you approached that? Did you have scenarios and kind of track down everybody you could with a variety of devices, or were there automated tools that you used to help with that testing?
I actually wrote a set of a test suite that could be implemented by hand, and we have a computer science student working for us this semester. Technically, he's working for our automated documents manager, but I borrowed him for about a week, and he actually did all of the testing, and we grabbed, we made sure we had every variation of an iPhone and as many Android devices as I could get my hands on. And an iPad. Actually, an iPad 1 and an iPad 2.
Great. So reason to include an iPad in your technology budget next year for testing purposes.
Yeah. Well, we have staff and interns who have them, so they just brought them in.
Great. Well, Cynthia through the Q&A box said great work with several exclamation points, and I agree. This is really impressive, and it's been exciting to see how you all have promoted these through various social media, and look forward to hearing more about user feedback as adoption grows. Great, thank you. All right. Well, again, feel free to keep the questions coming in the Q&A box. In the meantime, we're going to shift now to mobile website development, so shifting away from mobile apps to websites that are optimized for mobile browsing. And we're going to kind of go back in time a little bit to the first LSC-funded program to launch a mobile optimized website, and hear from Kathleen and Brian about how that project has evolved. Okay, and go ahead and unmute you, Kathleen. All right, great, you should be.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
And you'll need to unmute Brian too, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for everybody else's presentations. They're really interesting, and thanks to LSNTAP and Bono Net for inviting us to be on this panel. I just wanted to mention before we start talking about mobile websites that as part of the same grant from TIG that Gwen talked about, excuse me, we're also developing a National Legal Services Finder app that I thought people might be interested in knowing about, and we hope to have that also in the stores by next month or maybe January at the latest. We're also doing a Pine Tree app, which is probably of less interest to this audience than the National Legal Services app, but I think you know, they'll all be free, so we're hoping that people within legal services will be making good use of the National Finder app. So you want to go forward, Liz? So it's interesting in listening to Gwen because I really think that there are some similar considerations with developing mobile as with developing apps. Although I think the biggest difference is that apps really are the new thing, and mobile website is no longer the new thing. It's still important, but I think that we should get over talking about mobile as a new option, because I think mobile, as the demographics that Liz showed demonstrate, is already here, and if we're not doing mobile, we're already behind the curve. So Brian and I'm sort of the content development person at Pine Tree, and Brian does the heavy lifting on the development at Pine Tree. So we're going to do kind of a tag team on this, and Brian's going to go next.
Great, so we can go to the next slide as well. So, yeah, back when I was first getting going with design, you know, every year there'd be heavier lifting computers. And web design got to be designing for the next and greatest thing. And you would gracefully degrade for people who had older computers that weren't up to snuff. And now with the increase in mobile devices, there's a fascinating topsy-turvy shift, which is that really the most logical way to proceed when you're designing a website these days is to go from the simplest to the most complex, and instead of graceful degradation, to go to progressive enhancement, so that you could add features as you go. We can go to the next slide. And so if you're in the great luxury, or behind the eight ball so far, that you're designing a website now, it would be the most helpful thing to think mobile first, and then to add complexity, which especially the HTML5 stuff allows a lot of conditional additions, so that you can actually move to a point where hardly anything goes to a mobile site, and the same code produces a really complex delivery if you have a full desktop. Next. So yes, indeed, here we are. The real world, everybody has a website, and how do you make it mobile? Well, Kathleen might have talked a little bit about the old Pine Tree mobile site, because essentially what she had to do there was to create two sites with two different sets of content. And so they were both kind of hard-coded HTML sites, and that required a lot of additional work. We're now on the point where our content is separated from how we deliver it. We're using a Drupal site. I know other people are using other CMS-driven sites that are database-driven. And it allows a much easier approach to what do you do with your data? How do you deliver it to different devices. And we're primarily going to look at Drupal, but we can go to the next slide. But there are some general considerations as well. And Kathleen will talk, I guess, about our first mobile site first.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk first about the kind of old-styled hard coding a site from scratch, because Liz, since Pine Tree's probably been in this game the longest of anybody in legal services, or among those who have been doing it the longest, she thought a little bit of a historical overview would be interesting. So I'm going to go through this quickly, and then Brian's going to talk about more in depth about kind of where we are now with adding mobile to the more modern Web 2.0 CMSs like Drupal. So just going back briefly, I think we had the first TIG grant for doing a mobile site back in 2009, and it's interesting that that's only 2 or 3 years ago, but at this point it seems like ages ago. And so we were still on a ZOP open source platform and didn't have the luxury of the kind of tools we have now. And anybody who's still on an older site would need to go through this process, although hopefully not, because it's much more labor intensive. But I think it was a really good exercise because it really forced us, as Gwen has mentioned and Brian has mentioned, to strip down our notions about delivery. You know, we got rid of graphics, we dumped all our interactive PDF forms, and we videos, simplified the navigation, and we really tried to strip it down so that it could be usable on even, you know, the most low-end phone, which is what we were kind of focusing on at that point. Go ahead, Liz. We were able to do some pretty interesting experiments, though. Through the use of Unicode, we were able to bring over all of our outreach pieces in, I think, 9 or 10 different languages. We did, again, strip them down. Doing mobile is really a good exercise, as Gwen alluded to, in thinking minimally and trying to really think about what message you're trying to deliver, and it really forces you to be economical with your language. Anyway, so we were able to bring over Arabic, Farsi, etc., although on some mobile devices at that time, not all of the non-Roman fonts showed up on every kind of mobile device. Again, for example, we had a very long, involved landlord-tenant set of instructions that we still have on our desktop site, and it's a very comprehensive overview of main landlord-tenant law. And so for the mobile, for example, we stripped that down to something immediate, something short, and it became tips before you rent. We did a similar thing with other kinds of tips before you buy a used car, things like that. And then we also tried to prioritize, we did prioritize content that we had for teens, because we figured that that was one of our real target audiences. We have a project called Kids Legal, and so we took a lot of our content targeted toward teens, again, tried to strip it down, make it real emergency sort of telephone number link intensive. And it's interesting, after we did our testing, we discovered that our clients wanted even more clickable telephone links than we had done in our first iteration, which kind of, again, indicated us the kind of information people were looking for through mobile. So I won't go into our first journey with mobile in any more detail, but I will point out that we coordinated with LSNTAP on this project to put up a mobile web development guide, And David Bonebreak, who was then at NTAP and now at LSC, did a really great job of pulling all of that together and posting it on NTAP, and it's still there. And I think it's still relevant to people who want to develop mobile. Go ahead. And it even includes a whole section on coding a mobile site from scratch, if that's where you end up. So before Brian talks about where we've gone now with our Drupal mobile site and how that comes together, I just wanted to show you a few of our web stats that sort of indicate some of the things that we looked at before we put up our second site, our Drupal site, and why. So this one shows from the time we started using Google Analytics in May 2010, shows the mobile traffic on our site. You can see it was edging up there a little bit until April of this year. That flat line through April, May, June, that's when we put up our new Drupal site, and we didn't have a mobile version up yet. And then you can see there in June is when our mobile Drupal site went up, and you can see that the traffic has really been accelerating since then. Also, we were interested to find out, this shows, again, from the time we started using Google Analytics to the time we took down our Zope mobile site, we were seeing that, and this reflects what Gwen was saying, that iPhone and Android were by far the major users. And so what this said to us is that maybe we had gone overboard to the extent that we stripped down the content and stripped down the site for low-end phones. I had originally had this sort of idealistic idea that all our clients would be out there using low-end phones and trying to access our information, and it turns out that it really is the hot smartphones that are driving the traffic, not the lower-end phones. And so when we went to Drupal, we relaxed our standards a bit on how stripped down the site should be, and we didn't really get as intensively into developing stripped down content from scratch as we did on the first round. Another pretty interesting thing when we looked at our stats is a lot of people were going to housing materials, a lot of people were going to family law materials, same thing as on our desktop site. But the things that were different were that a lot of people were going to the kid-centric information. That was 5th on the traffic content list after the home page and the contact page. And this was quite different from our desktop site. So I guess we were kind of right in guessing that a lot of our audience was going to be younger people. The other surprise was that the consumer index was very high on the content usage stats. And that is quite different from on our desktop site where consumer is down much further. So I'm still scratching my head a little bit about that one, but it was interesting to note. Jumping ahead a little bit, this is our current stats for this past month, and very similar to what Gwen mentioned. Android browser is 6.9% of our traffic. iPhone is 3.8%. So those two alone, which are the major mobile operating systems, account for over 10% of our traffic. Okay, Brian. So now Brian's going to talk about kind of where we went from looking at those stats and developing our new site and how that went.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the common issues that you have when you're developing a mobile piece to your website, there are kind of common issues whether you have a CMS like Drupal or whether you're doing stuff in HTML. Is you have to figure out how are you going to detect the device that's contacting your site? How do you redirect that device? And what do you do about differences in content? I think, as Gwen pointed out, some content doesn't really work across platforms, Flash being one, proprietary info such as the Adobe interactive forms. And sometimes you simply want different content, simpler content in the mobile site. So how do you deal with those issues? And finally, what happens with the with Google and our wonderful search engines out there? If you go the route of having one common data between a mobile and non-mobile site, you run the possibility of having duplicate content as far as the search engines go, which they really don't like and will penalize you for in terms of where you stand. So I'm going to look at some of these in terms of where we went with Drupal. And the age that we're in, oh, I guess, let's see, tell me about that, Kathleen. There's
Oh, okay. I was going to go ahead because I was muted, but I'll just talk about this a second. Gwen already mentioned this, that, for example, with Adobe, this is a, can you get that back up, Liz? Yep. This is what one of our interactive forms looks like on iPad. And as Gwen mentioned, you can download a free app on iPad to get forms, but it doesn't handle interactive forms. So for $9.99, you can get an Adobe Expert or something like that that will handle most of the interactivity, although it doesn't handle our most complex forms with a lot of math in them. So that's just one example of what Brian's talking about with, you know, mobile still trying to catch up on some kinds of content. Go ahead.
We can go next. So within Drupal, we're kind of blessed because you have content that's completely separated from its presentation. What was missing from Drupal, which if some of you are using it, you know all too well, is the documentation for open source platforms is all over the place, and it's not just concise and ready to go. So we spent quite a bit of time just exploring the various options that were out there for mobile. But we're able to settle on you know, a pretty simple setup, which is a module called Mobile Tools, which does the heavy lifting of setting up a mobile user, which I'll explain in a minute, and switching the theme according to what browser or particular type of device is contacting your site. And then we also added an international translation piece, which we weren't using for our content that was in other languages. We had a different format set up for that, but we set up a mobile language, and when you're beamed over to, when Drupal sees you coming in as a mobile device, it automatically set it up so it would switch the language to mobile. What that means in practical terms is that when you're creating content, it allows you to create content for any particular page in any of the languages that you've set up. So our welcome page could be have a whole nother translation, as it were, in mobile, which might allow us to simplify things or to drop the videos down to a YouTube link. The Wurfel module is one that has a huge library that's publicly contributed to of all the kinds of mobile devices are out there, and Mobile Tools uses that so it can kind of piece things together. When somebody contacts your website, is looking at it, it can figure out everything from what kind of device is it to how big is the screen. You can get really refined should you go that route. It's work for the developer. What we stayed with a pretty simple thing, which was having kind of an on-off. If it comes in, if we see a mobile device contacting us, we switch the theme to a mobile theme, which cuts out all the side blocks like the latest news, cuts out most of the pictures, cuts out the header, simplifies the menu, just moving to that theme. And then we also have alternative content then through the international translation, so that we don't have any embedded videos. We'd have a thumbnail to a YouTube link. So the other part of that was to have a mobile theme, which we ended up, for a lot of reasons, creating our own. And then a menu by, it says user, but it's really the menu by role module, which allowed us to kind of pick for mobile users what menu items from the main menu ought to show up. Next is good. So from our end, with Drupal, we're able to take all of our content, although we did take out some menu items which included our forms, figuring that people would probably want to go to the full website to be able to print off and download the forms. So at least for now we did that. So you can see there's a simpler menu, a much simpler theme, no sidebars, no embedded videos, but links. Search is prominent, which is kind of a main feature in mobile, is that you can, often people come in to search straight off. And because so many devices handle it pretty well, there's also a link to the full site. And in a similar vein, if you should be on the desktop if you've gone to the full site and are looking at that, you could switch back. Part of setting up a mobile home or a mobile site brought us to the conclusion that we needed a subdomain, which is common to have an M in front or a Mobi behind, which basically allows you to cache things properly. Because so much of our, especially when it's a data-driven website like a Drupal or any of the other CMS, WordPresses, and those things, caching, if you have both mobile and desktop on the same domain, it gets really confusing. The cache of the latest page for the home page might be in mobile, might be in the full desktop, and so in order to get around that so that people aren't confused when they come to the website and not understanding why they're getting something they weren't asking for, we set up a subdomain. But it essentially serves all the same content out in the same, even the same pages as our full desktop site.
Brian, I just wanted to do a time check. We just have about a minute left for this section, and then we'll turn it over to Christine.
Good. We're at the links here. And I would encourage people, if they're going to go into setting up a mobile site, to really look at that first link, Rethinking the Mobile Web. If you're working in Drupal especially, it's a really good run-through of the various things you need to think about.
Great. Well, thank you. All right. Well, we will wrap up then, shifting from the first mobile web project in the community to a more recent mobile web project that Christine Mandiloff from Montana Legal Services Association is going to talk about, and involves developing a mobile version of the Law Help platform. All right. Great. So Christine, your audio line should be open now.
Great, thank you. Hi, this is Christine. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but we are basically working with Bono Net, and so Liz will also talk more about design. And basically all I want to say is, you know, for many reasons why Montana got involved in this project to develop a mobile portion of the Law Help functionality is our factors that probably exist in your state to some degree, especially with lack of funding, cutbacks, whatnot. We're finding that technology is just incredibly essential to the way that we provide legal services. And Law Help, our Montana Law Help specifically, is that just very important. Next slide, please. So, for us, Montana Law Help is the only website of its kind in Montana. We feature information and materials that some of the other websites in the state do not. We each have a different focus, and that works well within our state. And our visits are increasing. These numbers probably will not look very impressive to you, but we do have a population under 1 million people. So to us, this makes this is significant, and our numbers are increasing, as I'm sure yours are too on your website. So we just began to see, wow, we need to really be at the head of the curve regarding the provision of legal services and information online. Next slide, please. So one thing that we noticed, and I'm probably speaking to the choir here, but in case any of you still are on the fence about mobile or not, I want to just talk about the reasons why we think it's important. We noticed that many of our clients are using mobile devices, particularly cell phones, and it's always amazing to us the mobile devices that they have. This is a made-up quote, but I think that probably many of us have said something to similar effect or heard other advocates say it. Next. Thank you. Okay, so, and we also assume that if it's happening in Montana, it's got to be happening everywhere else. I think we lead the nation on grizzly bear attacks, but I don't think we really lead the nation on much else. So we decided that if we're seeing mobile as being very essential in Montana, that's probably true in other states as well. Next, please. So basically, we got TIG funding. We are collaborating with Pro Bono Net, Colorado Legal Services, and Northwest Justice Project. Again, what we're doing is we are creating the mobile website functionality for the newly rebuilt lawhelp.org platform. And this will allow not only Montana, but all other law help states to do the same, to use, provide mobile ready information to people within their own states. So the three partners aside from Pro Bono Net are working mostly on content template development, and we'll be working on testing the functionality. Pro Bono Net is responsible for the technological design and development, and Liz will talk about that in a moment. And one thing to note is that we are still in the beginning stages of this project, so I'm speaking from that perspective. But one thing about mobile that we think is really important, and I kind of was thinking about this as I was listening to the other presenters, is not only does it provide another medium for finding legal information online, but it also provides a way for people to get that legal information exactly when and where they need it. And we think that's really important, and that's something that I think people need to think a lot about. I have been thinking about that when I'm thinking about content development. Basically, if you have a woman who's dropping her kids off for a visitation for the very first time under a parenting plan, and the other parent is half an hour late, in the old days, she would either have to try to get on a phone somewhere and call her attorney if she was lucky enough to have one, or maybe even call the police, but really she had no access to ready information about what to do. And that is what is so neat about mobile, is that people will be able to access legal information, hopefully at the right time when they really do need it. Next, please. So the way that we progressed is basically to talk to folks about their mobile projects and what they've done and what they've been doing. That's very helpful in hearing, not only their success stories, but their challenges. We also asked for a lot of input from the legal technological community and the law help community. Next, please. We went online and we looked at mobile information online, and there is a ton of information. So I would suggest that if you're interested in it, go ahead and look. It's out there. And we also, along with the other presenters, found that, our assumption that people were maybe trying to use lower end cell phones to find information online, that assumption was not true. That basically it's all about smartphones. Everything is about smartphones. Smartphones are becoming less expensive, and hopefully data plans will be more varied, and hopefully some of those will be less expensive in the future as well. And so we decided to really get behind the smartphone design. Next, thank you. We did query clients and we queried partner staff, so we wanted to make sure that our assumptions were borne out and confirmed. And yes, indeed, our clients are using smartphones to access online information. Next, please. So essentially, that is the focus that we are building the platform on. Again, I just want to say, if anybody's worrying that we're leaving people out in the cold who have old, they're called old, feature phones, old non-smartphones, the data really doesn't suggest that. The data really suggests that folks with those types of phones are not accessing getting online just because it's too difficult or it's too expensive. Their phone screens don't show up well, that kind of thing. Next, please. So just the 4 points of best practices that I think we've learned so far before Liz talks about the design is talk to others who are doing this. You're doing that right now, and we encourage you to do that. If you have questions for us, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're more than happy to talk with you. Look at the research on mobile. It's amazing. It's incredible. Talk to your clients about what they're using their mobile devices for, how they think they best would receive legal information on a mobile device. And then also talk to your staff, not only for input about what their clients are doing or their mobile devices that they're using, but also to win them over to the benefits of a mobile site. I think that many of us who are not really, really into tech a whole lot, kind of look at or used to look at mobile as sort of sexy and fun, but really it wasn't necessary. And I think that mobile really can be and will be necessary. And I think that talking to your staff about that will get them behind your project and really encourage them to really start to think about the way they provide legal services as well. And Liz, I think it's now to you.
Great, thank you, Christine. So I wanted to just provide a thumbnail of the technical approach that Pro Bono Net is using to develop the mobile platform. The development will essentially consist of 2 elements. The development of a core web application using the HTML5 framework, and then for the mobile platform, and then development to actually serve up the content to the mobile site. So, for example, resources or organizations from within the Law Help content management system. And for those of you that are Law Help admins, within your sort of familiar Law Help admin tools, you'll have the option to either tag a resource for display on the mobile site or create new resources that are specially formatted or configured to display on the mobile site. And Jim Wiggand, Pro Bono Net Technology Director, has been kind of spearheading and really kind of thinking through this framework and looking to both future-proof it and make it kind of extensible to other other content types, and also the Pro Bono Net platform in the future, as well as the Law Help platform. As Christine mentioned, we're also working with Colorado Legal Services and the Northwest Justice Project to develop mobile-specific resource templates that take into account best practices around length and formatting for viewing on mobile devices. Part of the reason for this and the tagging concept above is recognizing that many Law Help sites have hundreds and hundreds of resources. Often they exist in formats like Gwen talked about earlier that are not optimal for using on mobile devices, interactive resources, certain kinds of videos, or other types of resources that can, at least in kind of this stage with mobile technology, be problematic for viewing on mobile devices. So this project will allow admins to designate a subset of content that takes into account both what content is most useful in a mobile context and content that's been kind of specifically written and formatted for that. And after a pilot stage in Montana, the new Law Help or new mobile site configuration and administration tools will be available to all 27 Law Help states, given the shared framework of the Law Help platform. And here are a preview of a couple initial designs. On the left, you see not the initial page, but interior page where users would have the ability to select to view self-help resources or legal aid resources, and then an optional kind of third category of content that admins could configure that might be clinics or court information. And then users would have the ability to view in detailed listings of referral information, as well as listings of consumer legal education resources as shown on the right. So we are working with project partners to continue to refine these, but are excited about the direction that we're heading so far. So we are just about out of time. If folks have any last questions or comments or thoughts, please feel free to send those through the Q&A box. As Christine mentioned, this is a really dynamic and evolving area, and we would love to hear what you're thinking and what your reactions are to this and what questions you may have as well. So feel free to email myself or any of the panelists afterwards if you'd like to learn more. And as a plug, we have 2 more webinars coming up this year. A webinar later this month on the how and why of social media strategies, and then we'll wrap up this series with a webinar focused on the expanding role of statewide websites, and we'll no doubt circle back to mobile themes in that as well. Great. Well, thanks again to all of our presenters. We really appreciate it. Sorry, was there a question or a comment?
Yeah, Liz, did you have other questions? If not, I wanted to say something, Kathleen.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if anybody on this call is on the Drupal template, and if you are, you probably already know, but there will be, or already is, I think, offered by Urban Insight on the Drupal template, the new 7.01, a similar mobile option that will have the same kind of admin interface. And so I guess you'd check with Brian Rowe if you're interested in that. And I also just wanted to mention that if you're not on a statewide website platform, but you just are a program out there with your own website, that if you're on any of the newer Web 2.0 platforms, that Brian was estimating you could probably put up a mobile version of your site in 10 to 20 hours. So it's not a huge investment of resources.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. And Brian's contact information is here if anybody would like to reach out to him about that, as well as Allison McDermott, who is co-coordinating this series along with Brian.
I think, does Kathleen mean Brian Stewart?
No, I meant Brian Rowe.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That somebody who was interested in the Drupal 7 template could talk to Brian Rowe, and he could get them in touch with Urban Insight about that.
Great. There was one question, Gwen, about kind of the ballpark budget for the Illinois, the development of the Illinois apps. Is that something that you have handy, or would you like me to follow up? I can send that question to you by email afterwards as well.
I can answer that. We put in a TIG grant. The TIG grant was about $35,000 for our development of our apps. However, that wasn't the full cost of the app. We ended up adding another $5,000 for some things that some sort of programmatic activities that had to be done outside of the grant, and we actually, that $35,000 was based on a number of hours that we probably almost doubled in actually spending. We actually did all of our own development in-house, which resulted in probably taking longer than it should have because I had never done mobile apps before. So actually, our pro bono app took significantly less time than the legal aid app, which was done first.
But Gwen, do you think that there is a similar projected curve? Like at first, putting up a mobile hard coding from scratch was also quite expensive, and now it's pretty relatively simple. Do you think there might be a similar trajectory for app development, that it will get cheaper?
Well, certainly it'll be cheaper if you hire somebody who's already knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And
good point.
If I had to do another one, it would probably take me less than half the time that it took me to do this one. Because at this point, I know what I'm doing. And also part of the problem is when we started this, the jQuery mobile platform was still in alpha. It's now moved in, it's actually in its second beta, but that added a significant amount of complexity with, we do it in this version of alpha, we'd get some things worked out, and we'd upgrade to the next one and get a few more things worked out, but break a few things in the process. So we're still dealing with sort of very, my graphic designer, I think, described it best when he says we're basically looking at what HTML was 10 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, that's sort of my point, that it will mature.
The cost of development will continue to go down the more app developers there are, and the easier the tools become.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks again to our panel, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. And don't hesitate to contact us if you have any follow-up thoughts or questions after, and hope to see you on the next webinar.